Welcome to the Global Peace Film Festival Lives Online Conversation 2022 Festival Edition. Please join me, Kelly Devine, the Artistic Director, and Nina Strike, the Executive Director, in welcoming Francisco Ugarte and Chihiro Wimbush from the film Ricochet, which is a part of our 20th anniversary film festival coming up in September. The in-person screenings and events begin September 19th and run through the 25th, followed immediately by our virtual online access beginning September 26th, ending October the 2nd. All the information about all of our events and screenings can be found at peacefilmfest.org. And now let's welcome Francisco and Chihiro to the conversation to discuss this really compelling film, Ricochet.
Hi.
Good morning.
Good morning, Francisco and Chihiro. It's wonderful to have you with us. And let's start. Chihiro, tell us about the film. And Francisco, if you can tell us about your role in the film and the events.
Yeah, so Ricochet is a film about the incident in 2015 where a young woman named Kate Steinle was accidentally shot and killed by an undocumented immigrant named Jose Inez Garcia Zarate. And it's about the sort of ensuing media and political frenzy that emerged from it during the presidential campaign that ultimately culminated in Donald Trump being elected president. And the film focuses on the point of view of the public defenders defending Jose, which include Francisco, as well as Matt Gonzalez. And it tracks from the incident through the trial and all the ensuing political and media mayhem that swirled around it.
So my name is Francisco, and I was the second chair in the trial of People v. Jose Inez Garcia Zarate. Matt Gonzalez is the chief attorney here at the San Francisco Public Defender's Office, and he was the lead attorney. So we co-counseled in the case. I also was the manager and am the manager of the Immigration Defense Program here at the Public Defender's Office. We're one of only 2 offices in the state of California, and the largest office that does deportation defense. And we had actually launched our deportation defense program literally a month before the trial began. I had never done a jury trial. I had never done a homicide case. I'm a deportation defense practitioner. And I was assigned to the case. I was literally told I would be on the case when the case started, mostly because of my immigration experience. And I had also played a role in crafting the sanctuary ordinance in San Francisco that was the main subject of the political analysis of the case from pundits from all spectrums of the all political spectrums.
So Francisco, let me pick up on that you were adapting to a number of different circumstances as you entered into this case, as you just mentioned. But I'm sure one that you may not have anticipated was that it was also being documented as a film, or did you know about that? And can you speak to what it's like having this kind of work documented while you are trying to put together a case for a jury that won't have the benefit of all of the other information that we learn as a part of the documentary?
Yeah, as a lawyer, you're trained not to want anybody listening in on your conversation. So one day, Jeff Adachi, the former public defender who unfortunately passed away in February of 2019, he had been talking about documenting this and putting it on screen, but literally one day I was walking up to Matt's office and there was a film crew. And I was like, okay. And Jeff's like, yeah, we're going to start doing a movie about this. And so Matt and I talked, and we were very frustrated and quite angry You didn't hear that part, but we also understood. We talked to our client Pepe, and we talked about that with him, and we understood that this was a historical moment. It was important to document, and so at first it was very, very uncomfortable in a lot of different ways. But by the end of it, it was almost as if they weren't there because we had gotten so used to their camera presence. And I joke that when I first was assigned this case in 2015, it felt like I was in a movie. It was like, hundreds of reporters, like you saw our footage on CNN, and like it was like a movie. Now it is a movie. So it's been a surreal experience from the beginning.
Well, and going from what you just mentioned, Francisco, about it being a historic moment, let me turn to Chihiro. Your work, even before this particular film, has been in using film for social change, and so can you speak to what attracted you and Jeff to this particular project, and what your thought process was about your approach?
Well, I think we knew early on that, just given the attention that this case was drawing, that this had historic significance. Obviously, we didn't know the impacts that would happen afterwards from the beginning, but it was clear that this was the biggest case to come out of Jeff's office. And early on, we also just talked about the themes that intersected with the film, because there's actually so many things that are still on the forefront of our discussions about what's happening in America right now, immigration, and where it intersects with criminal justice in particular. And then, as I mentioned before, politics and media and the messages that we get from it, gun control as well. There's so many things sort of jammed into this small little film. And that was part of the challenge too, was there's so many different directions that one could go with the film, because you have multiple themes, multiple characters, multiple points in time that you're crisscrossing between. So it was both what made it exciting, and I have to say, as an editor, it made it really challenging to go through. There's a reason why it took almost 4 years to edit the film, because there was just so much footage, not just what we shot, where we're sort of the sort of fly on the wall view of Francisco and Matt in the office and the work on the trial, but then all the newsreel, all the footage actually from the trial itself, and how to mix all these different points of view and people and bits of information in a way that was coherent and resonant beyond just the moment that it was in. And of course, we see now that all these things are actually perhaps even more relevant than they were even back then. None of this has gone away, including Donald Trump, unfortunately, and all of it continues. So I think it was a hunch on Jeff's part that actually ultimately paid off in much bigger ways than even we anticipated back at the beginning.
Fascinating. And Francisco, I know people who are listening to this have not seen the film, and I have, but I do want to urge them to watch it, because I think it really educated me about the process, and it gave me, I already had an admiration for public defenders before seeing this film, but it really increased and was substantiated by watching the process. And I thought, and either one of you can correct me if I'm wrong. To me, the ultimate takeaway for me in the film was that all too often a criminal justice procedure is not necessarily what we are told to think it is in civics class, that it's a search for facts and to establish those facts and what happened in order to protect society. That unfortunately, sometimes those facts and the people who become involved in them are just props.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that, you know, one of the, I mean, there are a lot of takeaways of this film, and I'm not sure if there is one. I'd like to know what Chihiro thinks about that. But one of the main takeaways should be that anytime you see a crime reported on by a reporter at the beginning of a case, virtually always those facts are not going to be the same that come out after a very intensive investigation of the facts with testimony, with evidence, with physical evidence. And so often, unfortunately, in this country, crime is reported as this kind of black and white issue where there's a perpetrator and a victim and a blame. And how did this happen? How did this person get released from jail? How is this immigrant get into this country? And unfortunately, what happened in this case is there was an underlying assumption that this was an intentional homicide, a close range shot. And so the reporters ended up focusing on, well, how did that happen? How did he get there? You know, and then it became, oh, his immigration status. And it conveniently was kind of a beautiful case for Donald Trump to exploit, this Mexican immigrant who's been deported many times, who's a prior felon, was here on a pier and killed this innocent, beautiful woman. And I want to underscore that what happened was an absolute unspeakable tragedy. And, you know, unfortunately, that was exploited for politics. But really what we saw was the media, the national media, very complicit in that and not doing their own investigation at the outset of the case to say, hey, well, wait a minute here. This may well have been an accident. And we really didn't get that until the verdict, really. Now, there were some local reporters in the Bay Area that started reporting on the case very effectively. Vivian Ho, Alex Emsley, Nwala Bashari, and I'm missing others, but the national media just totally missed this case and really did harm to our country and to the rhetoric around immigration.
And Chihiro, would you like to speak to, you know, what those takeaways might be from the film?
Yes, I definitely agree with Francisco. I mean, I think for me, the biggest thing is this idea of the messaging that we receive. And obviously we've seen that play out not just in the 2016 election, but also the 2020 election. And I imagine it will continue going forward through our next couple of cycles. And so I think what Francisco says about how a case is framed, but really all the information we get, it's an opportunity for us, I think, to question the narratives that we receive, because so often, you know, someone's framed as a criminal or events are framed a certain way to suit a certain political agenda. And I think that's where, at their best, documentaries can really shine, because so much of our media now is kind of enclosed in its own tribal bubble to kind of reinforce the messages that we want to believe. And I'm not saying that what we produced is like a pure 100% objective, you know, of course there's a point of view in it, but I think one thing I really strive to do in the edit was to try to be as fair as I could and as true to the facts as I could. So for example, with the Steinle family, you know, telling their story is quite complex because they have some challenging views on things that came out of this tragedy, some really unfortunate things like Kate's Law came out of direct actions that they did. At the same time, you know, there's some nuance there. They're not, the family was not a homogenous entity, and so and there was some evolution over time. And so trying to capture as much nuance as one can in 75 minutes, which obviously is limiting to some extent, but as much as one could to cover a very complex case, I tried my best to do that so people could come to their own decisions rather than trying to force a point of view, which we get enough every day in our media. And so, you know, I just strive to, I think as a documentary filmmaker, you hope to kind of shine a spotlight on an important issue and tell a story where ultimately the viewers can reach their own conclusion and come away and think about it, talk about it, and hopefully be moved to act on something to make a difference.
Well, and that, Chihiro, is a lovely segue to, connecting why we chose this film for our particular festival, what our mission is. And that word act, positive, peaceful, just act is action, is what we strive for. We program films that we hope certainly will be compelling and educate people, but we also hope that our audience members will take something away from the screening into their own lives, into their communities. Sometimes films come with impact campaigns and particular calls to action. Others do not, but there's still an opportunity to bring that message into their lives in order to make it a just, more peaceful world. And so if you could just speak to some of the activities around the film that you are trying to work on.
Yes, definitely. There's a couple of components we have. One is just if people want to dive a little bit deeper on our website, ricochetfilm.com. One, there's more information about the film, but we have an education page where there's a link to a discussion guide that asks a lot of questions if folks they want to gather after having a screening of the film and dive a little deeper. We're also putting it out into classrooms through our educational distributor Good Docs because we really want to spark these conversations around these issues. And then we also have a take action page on our website with where we want to highlight a bunch of these organizations who are at the front lines of this intersection between immigrant rights and criminal justice. And maybe Francisco can speak to that because he was really the person who actually found these organizations and can really speak to that work.
Sure. So, this film captures, or this case kind of dealt with, as Chihiro said, many of the issues that are pressing today. Immigration, of course, is probably the primary one. Gun safety is a major issue, and gun violence that is happening in this country, certainly in Florida. And for the viewers to understand, this case involved a loaded gun. A federal agent mishandled the gun by keeping it in a backpack in his car. His car was burglarized, and somehow this gun, which was fully loaded, and this gun is called a Sig Sauer P239, did not have a trigger safety, a manual trigger safety. So any pressure on the trigger would cause it to discharge. The gun also, you can't tell if it's loaded by simply looking at the gun. And so, there are laws in place that prevent the storage of loaded guns in backpacks, but somehow that was never really reported on. And, as you saw in the film, more than one person dies every day because of an accidental gun discharge. Most of those are children. And that's what happens when you have 300 million guns in circulation in the United States. There's no real regulation around how guns can be manufactured. And there's very little control of who can buy a gun. So it's really chaotic. The gun industry is the least regulated industry of any kind of consumer product that we see. So that's just another part. Then you have homelessness. And it is truly shocking that someone who had been in prison for about 17 years, including just having served a 7-year sentence for illegal entry into the country, was released in San Francisco County Jail with no money, no housing, no family, no friends, and was just expected somehow to adjust. And, that's what happens in our criminal justice system every day. And we expect as a society, just, take care of it, fix it. But we as a society have an obligation, if we incarcerate people for such a long time, to help them adjust. Where was the probation officer? How did he not show up for probation in a few days? So these are just issues. And then, of course, on the immigration front, one of the grave injustices in this country that happens today, of course, is mass incarceration, but many of the people incarcerated in this country are incarcerated because they've tried to come to the country. It's a crime if you try and come to the country without papers. It's the quintessential victimless crime. And for those individuals who may have had a prior conviction in the past, but who have family here, who've lived here most of their lives, if they come back and they get apprehended, they're looking at a 5 to 20 year sentence in federal prison. And the most common charged crime in the federal system, this is an entirety of the federal system, the most common charged crime is illegal reentry after deportation. And so there are many organizations that are fighting to reform these laws, including the National Immigration Project, of part of the National Lawyers Guild. That is a kind of collaboration of attorneys across the country that does a lot of border work, that does a lot of deportation defense and assisting people who are seeking asylum that are subsequently criminalized for trying to come to the border. There's a group called National Day Labor Organizing Network, NDLON, that's centered in Los Angeles, that does work with recently arrived immigrants to protect their wage and hour rights. And there's a California Coalition on Immigrant Justice that does a lot of detained work for immigrants. So we invited folks to support those organizations in their struggles to make society better.
Well, that's a really comprehensive list of things that people can look for. And thank you for sharing the information about the website. We will have the website on the closing title card so that people can write it down if they don't remember it from when you mentioned it. So you've very clearly delineated so many things that you're doing about this. How more can people who are watching this support your work, both either of each of you, and also what's next for both of you?
Well, as far as, excuse me, as far as the film goes, so we're obviously in the middle of our festival run. I'm excited to be at your festival, at the Global Peace Film Festival, and we'll be continuing probably at least through the end of the year into next year. And then sort of simultaneous to that, looking to sort of pursue other forms of distribution through broadcast and streaming to try to get the film seen by as many people as possible. And we have I think on our webpage, on our homepage, we have a fund distribution button, because obviously there's a lot of costs associated with that. So if people want to continue to support the work of the film, they can go there. But our hope is to we feel like it'll still be relevant, probably at least up until 2024. So we'll just keep working to push this out there and have these conversations. And as for myself, I actually have a film that I was working on when Jeff passed away. I was originally just the editor on this film, and when he passed away, I took over those duties because I was the one person who knew all the footage, and I put my project aside to finish this film for Jeff, and because I felt this film was so timely and important to get out now. So one day, I'm not sure when, maybe next year, I hope to get back to this project, which is called Every Step of Prayer. And it's about a group of Indigenous grandmothers in the Bay Area who lead a series of healing walks to the 5 refineries of the North Bay. It's kind of a surprising thing that the San Francisco Bay Area would have so many oil refineries, because we think of it as a progressive bastion, but that is the unfortunate fact. And so it's about a group of Indigenous grandmothers who will be, who actually have been leading a series of walks and passing a torch to a new generation of young Indigenous leaders in sort of the global climate justice fight, as well as the land movement right. So I hope that will be something upcoming for 2023, once we get off the road with Ricochet.
I would say, I've had quite a trajectory of political work or activism and lawyering. And to me, I've gotten to a point where I believe the best thing that we can do in this country is engage with our adversary in a healthy way where we can listen to each other. And I know that may sound a little corny, but I've gotten to a place where I really believe in the human spirit. I believe that, there may be forces that are trying to separate us and divide us, but with social media road rage, with the way we dialogue with each other, I feel like it really is an imperative for us to figure out how we can relate with each other and find common ground and solve problems together. And I know, again, sometimes there's going to be situations where there's conflict. I'm a lawyer, I'm in an adversarial system, but even my own lawyering is starting to change in style and trying to appeal to the decision makers and appeal to the adversary. And that may, again, sound corny, but I've gotten kind of to that place in my life right now. I'm also writing a book about the case, and I've written a manuscript. Needs a lot of work, but it's been a really fun experience for me. And those that have read it have kind of enjoyed it. It's kind of a storyteller. I'm a better storyteller than narrative arc person. So I have a lot to work on, but it's been a really fun experience, and hopefully that will be published in 2024. So
we will definitely stay in touch with both of you regarding those upcoming projects. And Francisco, I just want to underline those two very powerful insights that we're ending with. Not only the insight to engage with people who disagree with us in a healthy way, but also the underlying insight of that you we're discussing your own progress and your own change in your life. And I think too often we don't reflect on the fact that we need to be open to change and to modifying our own ways in the world. So I think those are two powerful insights. So thank you for sharing those with us.
thank you.
And thank you all for watching this Glow. Again, we've been talking with Francisco Ugarte, Chihiro Wimbush about their film project, Ricochet. You can find out more information and resources and delve a little more deeply into the project and the issues around this particular film by visiting ricochetfilm.com. And also, please check out and seek out the film at our festival and at any other festival if you're in a different part of the world. Our film festival begins September 19th through the 25th for our in-person screenings and events, followed immediately by our virtual online events September 26th through October 2nd. All the information can be found at peacefilmfest.org. Thank you again, and we'll see you at the next Glow.